Imagine, if you will, you and your party come into possession of a map that seems to lead to a secret chamber underneath a tower of an evil wizard. You manage to conquer the tower, defeat the evil wizard, and decide to go find the secret room and bask in the bountiful loot that is sure to be in there. You find the door to the hidden room and enter to find 4 chests lined up at the back of the room. Once you enter, the door slams shut. The door splits into a gaping mouth with razor-sharp teeth, and small eyes appear in the wood of the door. Behind you, you hear the sound of hungry snarls and growls and see the chest at the back of the room, same as the door, with eyes and gaping maws with sharp teeth. It looks like the wizard had one last trap in this tower. Today, we are diving into the very embodiment of deception itself, the mimic. Hello and welcome to Dungeon Deep Dive, where we talk about all things D&D, from monsters and their lore to news updates and tips and advice for anyone interested in Dungeons and Dragons and want to give it a try. Today we are talking about the Mimic, one of the most popular monsters in all of D&D, I would say, and one that always breathes terror into players. The Mimic made its first appearance in D&D in the very first 1977 Monster Manual, and in this book there are actually 2 kinds of mimics. One named the Killer Mimic, which is low in intelligence and attacks anything that comes into contact with it, and another slightly smaller than the latter with higher intelligence and the ability to communicate. This one is going to be referred as the Common Mimic. They can also speak an array of languages from Common to Orcish to Elvish, and will inform anyone who encounters them about who or what they have seen pass through their lair, and grant safe passage to people in exchange for food. It is said that some variants that are of higher intelligence can find the taste of sentient beings not to their liking and decide to leave their domains and find creatures to converse with and find companionship. They are described in the book as subterranean creatures who do not stand the light of the sun, and this is because their skin is covered with light sensitive sensors that can detect any heat at a range of 90 feet. It says exposing the mimic to a ton of sunlight, the sensors would be quickly overwhelmed and have a chance to render the mimic blind. Now when it comes to the true form of the mimic, not a lot of people know its true form, but some have said that it's an amorphous brown mass with 4 red beads for eyes and a gaping maw of razor sharp teeth. If it ever has the need to move, it can use its 4 pseudopods to latch to a surface or just even the ceiling if need be to hold in place. When a mimic chooses to change form, it can mimic the item being either a classic chest or a door or a chair, a book, or even a bookshelf that could hold book mimics themselves. And when they transform, it's not only their outer forms that change, but also their organs change with their shape shifting, especially their stomachs that can grow or shrink depending on what form they take. For example, if an intelligent mimic takes the form of a large chest, then it will more than likely fill its stomach with its possessions, if it has any, instead of dragging them around in a sack or a bag. The more intellectual mimics also have the ability to shape change into more intricate objects than their more carnivorous counterparts, like books or even a small lock. The attitude of the intellectual mimic will all depend on how it's been treated by the society in the area. To start, they begin as being quite curious and easygoing and naive, but with people being in an all distrusting of mimics because of their killer mimic siblings, they can be treated with a lot of hostility, and this will tend to make them become more spiteful towards the kinds of people who mistreated them. The killer mimics are primarily solitary hunters and will share their domains with other species, as one adult humanoid could sustain a mimic for several weeks and tend to take the form of more simple objects like chests and doors. It's very rare, but sometimes mimics could form a colony together. If enough of them gather into one spot, when a colony is formed, the mimics can work together to form buildings, structures, walls, even cliff sides and statues, or nearly anything that they can think of. When a colony is formed, the mimics of the colony develop the ability to communicate telepathically between each other and with any other mimics that are within 10 miles. And if there's any offspring that the colony produce, innately they have the telepathic ability rather than learning it later in life, and can even use this ability outside of the colony. There's something I find absolutely horrifying about the thought of a full town of mimics, where literally everything is a mimic, from the house to the light post and even to the cobbles on the road. Like, even in the Forgotten Realms setting, there is said to be frost mimics that are tamed and controlled by dwarves and make them as pets, and I find that very cool. If your party encounters a mimic and you end up destroying the mimic, Make sure that you take some of their skin, as it can be used as an ingredient for a polymorph self potion, and some other parts of the creature can be sold to primarily alchemists for quite a high price. The actual origin of mimics is debated back and forth between historians, but most people believe that they are of magic creation by wizards to serve as protectors for their magical and precious items. While there are some people that believe they are actually originated from the Far Realm, with them having monstrosity-esque qualities similar to that of creatures of the Far Realm, and honestly I could see that. Their true form is quite horrifying. When a mimic begins to crest into adulthood at around 10 years old and becomes that of a large size and has eaten enough prey, the mimic begins a process called asexual mitosis, where it will split into two mimics, similar to how the cells of the body divide. The way mimics hunt for food is by sitting perfectly still in the form that they chose until the creature comes into contact with it, but it also can release a small pheromone that can attract small creatures like rats and other similar creatures to satiate its hunger until travelers arrive. If a group of adventurers come across a mimic, it will look indistinguishable to a normal chest or door until you go over to open it. It will then lash out using its adhesive slime that they secrete to attach themselves to their victims and trap them. It also uses these adhesives as a means of transportation to adhere itself to surfaces. So given that it can hold a mimic on a wall or ceiling, which a mimic weighs around average 4,500 pounds, it can be quite sticky. There is a great way to get rid of the adhesive to help you escape the mimic's grasp, and it's the application of alcohol. Just purely pouring a cask of ale onto some of the adhesive should neutralize it off your body and give you a chance to escape. Now we've talked about their origins, their ecology, their society, and the way they hunt. Let's go over some of the stats of the variants of the mimics that you could encounter as a player, or put them in games yourself as a DM. Alright, so let's start with the most common mimic found in the 5e Monster Manual. So let's start with the most common mimic. Found in the 5e Monster Manual, sitting at a challenge rating of 2 and an armor class of 12 with 58 hit points. I'm assuming this is because of its adhesive liquid they secrete, that they are immune to any and all acid damage. For its shapeshifting ability, the mimic can use its action to polymorph into an object or back into its true amorphous form. Its statistics are the same in each form. Any equipment it is wearing or carrying isn't transformed, and it reverts to its true form if it dies. In its object form, the mimic sticks to anything that touches it. A huge or small creature sticks to the mimic and is also grappled by it. To escape the mimic's grapple, you have to make a DC 13 ability check, but you do make it with advantage because any ability checks made to escape this grapple has disadvantage. Personally, I think the DC for this is a little low. I would give it maybe a DC of 15 with the fact of how strong the adhesive is in the description. It can hold a mimic that weighs 4,500 pounds. I feel like it should have a higher DC than that. It can attack with its pseudopods that do a +5 to hit and have a 5-foot reach and deals 1d8 +3 bludgeoning damage. And if the mimic is in object form, the target is subjected to its adhesive trait. It also has a bite attack that has a +5 to hit and a reach of 5 feet that deals 1d8 +3 piercing damage plus 1d8 of acid damage. Next, let's jump to a variant of the mimic that you'll see after an adult mimic splits, and that's the juvenile mimic. Sitting at a challenge rating of 0 and an armor class of 11 and 7 measly hit points. These guys are not really much of a threat, except maybe for a group of like level 1 players for their first session. Or maybe you could do something like they find a small little chest in a hoard of treasure, they throw it in their bag, and later while they're traveling, it jumps out and attacks them. It's just like a nice little surprise. It has the same abilities as the normal mimic, except its bite deals 1 whole piercing damage and 1d4 acid damage. So you will do more damage with your acid than the bite itself. Strangely, it has the ability Spider Climb, where it can climb difficult surfaces as well as walls and ceilings. But the normal mimic doesn't have this in its stat block, which I think it should. Lined up next, we have the Spitting Mimic. Some people may recognize this mimic from the campaign 3 of Critical Role, where they face one of these behind a theater. With a challenge rating of 5 and an AC of 14 and hit points of 85, this thing is a little chunkier than your usual mimic. It has the same shape changer and grapple abilities, but it also has advantage on saving throws against spells and other magical effects. For its action, it does get a multi-attack where it can attack 3 times, twice with its pseudopods and once with its bite. Its pseudopods are a +8 to hit and have a 10-foot reach, and they deal 1d10 +5 bludgeoning damage. And if the mimic is in object form, the target is subjected to its adhesive trait, which is the same as normal mimics. Which, looking at the DC, it's a little bit higher. It has a DC of 16, and the players must again make it at disadvantage. See, I feel like 16 is around the DC that the normal mimic should have, just because of the adhesive qualities. But hey, that's just me. Its bite attack is a +8 to hit and a reach of 5 feet, and deals 1d10 plus 5 piercing and 2d6 acid damage. This variant of the mimic also has a spit acid action that recharges on a d6 roll of a 5 or a 6. The mimic spits acid at one creature it can see within 30 feet of it. The target must make a DC 14 dex saving throw or take 9d6 plus 1 acid damage on a failed save and half as much damage on a successful one. And last on our list of variants, we have the huge horde mimic. Sitting at a challenge rating of 8 and an AC of 14 with 123 hit points, these things will make you double check a dragon's horde before looting it. Its false appearance ability is if the mimic is motionless at the start of the combat, it has advantage on its initiative roll. Moreover, if a creature hasn't observed the mimic move or act, the creature must succeed on a DC 18 intelligence or investigation check to discern that the mimic is inanimate. This one also has a multi-attack with a bite and 2 pseudopod attacks. The bite attack has a +8 to hit and a reach of 5 feet and deals 2d10 plus 5 piercing damage and 2d6 acid damage. The pseudopods have a +8 to hit and a 10-foot reach and deal 2d6 plus 5 bludgeoning, and the mimic adheres to the target. A creature is stuck to the mimic and is also grappled by it, and is also restrained, which means the restrained creature's speed becomes 0 and it can't benefit from any bonuses to its speed. Also, attack rolls against the creature have advantage and the creature's attack rolls have disadvantage. And with being restrained, the creature has disadvantage on dex saving throws. If the creature wants to escape the grapple, it needs to make a DC 16 ability check, and it has to make it with advantage. Again, I feel like this one should be pretty high. I feel like this one should be like in the 18 or 19 mark, purely because of the size of a horde mimic. I mean, these things are classed as a huge monstrosity, so I feel like their DC would be a little bit higher. Unique to the horde mimic, it has a caustic mist attack that recharges on a d6 roll of a 5 or 6, sprays a fine mist of acid in a 30-foot cone. Each creature in that area must make a DC 14 dex save, and on a failed save, the creature takes 68 acid damage and is blinded until its next turn. On a successful save, the creature takes half as much damage and isn't blind. Mimics are really interesting monsters, and with the fact that there are intelligent and not so intelligent versions, you could have some real fun with them. You could do the classic dungeon crawl with a room that's filled with chests, only find out that the room's full of mimics like we mentioned at the start of the video, and even the door is a mimic, so you're just in this kill box of teeth and just gnashing maws and death everywhere. But what about if the players are sailing on the seas or traveling on an airship and find an abandoned ship on the water or in the air stationary, only to find that the crew's missing and there's blood everywhere, and they find out that the cargo that they were carrying was mimics, and they had to and they took out the entire crew. That idea I like. Or maybe, and I do kind of like this one, you could have a mimic colony that grows and develops under a small town and consumes everything and destroys everything in the town, but then takes the place of the town, replacing the buildings and the streets with mimics, and anyone who comes to the town is never seen again. Honestly, I may use that one as well. Be careful, players, if you're watching. You may run into a town full of mimics. But that is going to be it for our video on the mimics today. Thank you all for watching. I hope you found this video helpful, and if there's anything else about the mimics that I missed, I would love to hear about it in the comments below. I will, as always, leave links to the websites I use for my research on this topic so you guys can read through them yourselves. Is there a monster you want to see me cover next? Let me know in the comments below and I will add your comment at the end of the next video. You can find links to all my socials down below to keep up to date with all the things happening on the channel. Thank you all for watching. Hope you have a great day, and I'll see you all next time.